Hello, I'm Justin Seven with SportsbookReview.com, and I'm bringing you the Notre Dame Week 2 wrap-up. Notre Dame beat Michigan 35-17, and the naysayers are out in strong force, once again saying Notre Dame was lucky. Notre Dame did have some breaks. They were beneficiaries of 6 Michigan turnovers. 2 very early in the game gave Notre Dame great field position for easy touchdowns, and before you knew it, Notre Dame's up 21-0. They went on to hold the lead, but the pessimists are saying, but for these lucky turnovers, Notre Dame would have lost. So we're going to look a little bit closer at this game and see if there's any truth to that. Let's start off taking a look at the game stats. Just looking at the stats, you see Michigan had 128 more total yards than Notre Dame, better yards per pass attempt, better yards per rush attempt, and you look at it and say, well, how did they get blown out? You know, surely they should have won except for turnovers. But there's some other things you need to take a look at also. One minor point here is penalties. Notre Dame had 40 fewer yards in penalties. There's another stat that's very important that this game stat box doesn't jump out at you with, and that is the punting game, which last week I gave Notre Dame an A on. If you look at the net punting yards, now the difference between net and gross is basically how many yards worse was their field position. So if you punt it out of the end zone, so it's a 20-yard touchback, that's 20 yards. The gross punt is 20 yards less than the net, but the net is what matters. The net also includes returns. So if you get a 1-yard return versus a 10-yard return, the 10-yard return is 9 yards worse on the net. The net is what really matters because that determines what the opponent's field position is. You look at Notre Dame's punting game, and they had over 240 yards of net punting. In fact, they won the punting war by 120 yards when you look at the net. That works out to be almost a complete difference in their offensive production for the two teams. So already, knowing nothing else except for the yardage of all the teams, you have Michigan winning the offensive yards by about 120 yards, Notre Dame winning on penalties by 40, and Notre Dame winning the kicking game by about 120 yards. So already, with those three factors, you have Notre Dame winning the game by about 40 yards. Rule of thumb, 10 yards is a point. You'd expect Notre Dame to win the game by 4 points, given those stats with no turnovers. Now let's talk about the turnovers for a second. Notre Dame had no fumbles this week. Clausen threw 2 interceptions. One of those interceptions was 3rd and 5. He threw a deep pass. Now there are times when it's okay to throw bad passes. I mean, you never want to, but there are times when it's less worse to throw a bad pass. 3rd and long or 4th down, those are times when the penalty for throwing an interception isn't as bad. Clausen, 3rd and 5, throws a deep pass that's intercepted. That's really not much worse than a punt. 4th down, he throws another interception. Maybe he could have made a field goal, but it's really no different than an incomplete pass. Now let's look at Michigan's turnovers. Michigan fumbles the opening kickoff. That's an execution mistake. Net result, Notre Dame scores 7 points. Michigan fumbles again shortly thereafter. Later in the game, Michigan State throws a lateral pass to the back running out of the field. Why are you throwing a lateral pass? This is a high-risk play anytime you throw it backwards, because obviously if you don't catch it, you have a potential turnover, as what happened here. So was that a quarterback error in execution? Was it a poor coaching decision? I don't know. But regardless of which mistake it was, Notre Dame was a beneficiary of it. There was a 4th fumble later. I don't remember what happened on that. But later in the game, Notre Dame's up significantly. Michigan has to throw into a pass defense, and not surprisingly, 2 more interceptions occur throwing against a pass defense. All right, let's take a look at Notre Dame's report card for last week against Michigan. On passing, I gave Notre Dame a C-. Clausen was 10 out of 21 passes with 2 interceptions. He managed to carry the game forward without losing it, but he really didn't do anything special to win it. Rushing similarly needs work. Notre Dame was averaging only 3.3 yards a pass, and that just doesn't cut it. If you look at where Notre Dame got A marks, pass defense, punting, and kicking, these are all related in that when you put Michigan on a long field, they're going to have to pass it more. The punting with a net of 38 yards a kick, the kicking game, no problems, good coverage on the kick returns, and pass defense. You get the opportunity to put Michigan where they have to pass into nickel and dime packages where you consequently pick up interceptions. Rush defense was mediocre, averaged 3.8 yards a run, which isn't bad. Overall, I gave them a B-. Now that we've finished last week's wrap-up, let's take a look at next week's game against Michigan State. It's very hard to evaluate Michigan State's performance this year because they've had two relatively easy opponents, and they also lost to California. Now, Michigan State's a little bit different from Notre Dame's other opponents in that probably their biggest strength is going to be their running game behind Ringer. For Notre Dame to defend against this running attack, they're not going to be able to play the same type of defense they've played against their first two opponents. For most of the year, Notre Dame's run a cover two, where they always have two guys deep, no one gets behind them, and in most deep routes you have an extra guy defending it. So you're usually having two double coverage on deep routes. In order to stop the run, you're not going to be able to run that the whole game. You're going to have to take some chances, you're going to have some safety blitzes or some zone coverage, but you're not going to be able to do the same type of defenses if you're going to hold Ringer, hold his rush yards down. So there's two defensive keys for Notre Dame. They have to hold Ringer to under 4 yards a rush attempt. And the second thing is they can't give up too many deep pass attempts, too many deep pass plays. Now it's going to happen. You're going to give up an occasional deep pass, but the question is how often. If Notre Dame gives up less than two 30-yard or longer pass plays, I'm going to consider that a defensive victory. The third key for Notre Dame's win against Michigan State this week will be their own rushing game. Michigan State's a little soft against the rush. They're allowing over 4 yards a carry. If Notre Dame can rush for 4.5 yards per attempt, that's going to put them on track to win. So here are the three keys for Notre Dame's win this week. I think Weiss can do this. Now, what do the computer numbers in Las Vegas say about this game? The early numbers in Las Vegas suggest Michigan State is an 8-point favorite. My computer numbers make Michigan State only a 2-point favorite, giving Notre Dame a 45% chance of winning. Even though I make Notre Dame a small underdog, I think you can see the difference between the statistical models and what Las Vegas is putting out shows that the public perception is Notre Dame is not as good as they actually are. So if I had to play a side on Michigan State -8 or Notre Dame +8, I'd take Notre Dame. I expect it to be a very close game, perhaps won by just a field goal, and I think it's both teams could pull this one out.